Welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. It's a book that kind of reveals some of those surprising, sometimes hidden human factors behind the financial choices that we make.
A lot of people just think financial success is about, mastering some complex investment strategy or having some secret formula. But the psychology of money challenges that notion.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes that these soft skills like patience, discipline, being able to control our emotions, they actually play a much bigger role than we think.
Yeah. It's a fascinating premise. And Housel, he begins by contrasting these stories of two individuals. So we have Ronald Reed, who was a janitor, and he amassed an $8 million fortune.
Wow.
And then we have Richard Fuscone, a Harvard MBA, who ultimately filed for bankruptcy. So, what can we even learn from these drastically different outcomes?
I think Reed's story is just so remarkable because it highlights the power of just being consistent and thinking long term.
Hmm.
He didn't get rich overnight. He just saved diligently from his modest income and invested in these well-established companies. And he did this for decades, really proving that slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, it's like the tortoise and the hare.
Exactly.
And then, on the other hand, Fuscone's story is almost like a cautionary tale. He has this prestigious education, this promising career in finance, but ends up bankrupt.
Huh.
Does this mean that his financial knowledge failed him, or was it something else?
I think Housel argues that our individual experiences really shape our worldview when it comes to finances more than we realize. And a lot of times that goes back to our childhoods.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Like imagine two people. One is raised in a family where saving is super important, financial prudence, and the other grows up with financial instability and witnesses, firsthand the consequences of impulsive spending. It's pretty clear how those different upbringings would create very different financial behaviors, right?
Right. Yeah. Because if you're not taught that or you don't see it modeled, then how would you know?
Exactly.
So it's not just about learning, the mechanics of investing. It's about understanding, like you said, our own relationship with money.
Absolutely. And Hazel points out something else that I think is crucial. The financial landscape that we all have to navigate today, with things like 401ks and, retirement planning, all that, this is all relatively new. It's really only been around for a few decades.
It's true. These systems weren't around for our grandparents, or even, in a lot of cases, our parents.
Exactly. So, in a sense, we're all pioneers, right? And I think that lack of generational wisdom makes it even more important to be aware of, like we were saying, all the psychological factors that influence the decisions that we make.
That's a great point. So we've got these new systems that we're all trying to figure out. And on top of that, we all have these unique experiences and backgrounds that are shaping how we interact with these systems.
Right.
And that leads us to another fascinating topic that's explored in the psychology of money. It's this role of luck and the idea of, understanding when we have enough. And these are things that we don't always hear in traditional financial advice, but it seems like they're crucial for making those sound financial decisions. So let's delve into that further. We often attribute financial success to hard work and talent, and while those are definitely important, the psychology of money encourages us to consider another factor that's often overlooked, and that's luck.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think a great example that Hassel uses to illustrate this point is Bill Gates.
Yeah.
We all know him as this brilliant entrepreneur, philanthropist, but how much of his success was really due to him just being in the right place at the right time?
Well, he had access to computers in high school.
Exactly.
And that was incredibly rare back then.
Exactly.
And I didn't even see a computer until I was, in college.
Right. So that early exposure for him, it undoubtedly played a role in shaping the path that he ended up on.
Yeah. And while obviously no one can deny his talent and drive, it's interesting to think about the role that luck played in him even having that opportunity.
Absolutely.
It's kind of humbling, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
I think that sometimes success is as much about circumstances as it is about, our own individual effort.
Definitely.
But Housel doesn't stop there. He goes on to look at the stories of John D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt. These guys were known for being pretty ruthless in business.
Yeah. Cutthroat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, was their extraordinary wealth a result of that?
Right.
This willingness to kind of bend the rules? Or was it just a matter of being in the right industry at the right time?
Yeah, was it just the Wild West and they were just there?
Right, exactly.
It's hard to know for sure.
It's hard to separate, luck from skill, especially when we're looking at these people who achieve success during periods of, maybe less regulation or where there was more opportunity for exploitation.
Yeah. It definitely makes you think about, like, how the systems that are in place really do create the opportunities in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And it's also important to consider this idea of, enough.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Housel talks about this story about Kurt Vonnegut, the author, and his friend Joseph Heller. They were at a party hosted by a billionaire, and Vonnegut, he made some comment about, all the wealth that this guy had.
Oh, wow.
And Heller just replies, yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough.
That's great. That's so good.
I love that.
I love
It really challenges that assumption that, the more money you have, the happier you'll be.
Yeah. Heller's statement really makes us think about, like, what really matters,
Yeah. What is it that we're really after?
Yeah. And maybe true wealth is recognizing when we have enough to live a fulfilling life,
Yeah.
rather than just constantly striving for more.
Yeah. Shifting the focus from, always accumulating to appreciating what we have. Maybe that's the key to, contentment.
Yeah, I think so. And this ties into Housel's point about, like, the illusion of wealth. He talks about his own experience working as a valet and parking all these luxury cars, Ferraris and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he realized that people were spending all this money to buy these flashy items just to impress other people. But those things, they don't really bring lasting satisfaction.
Yeah. So total paradox. We chase wealth believing that it will bring us happiness, admiration. But then, a lot of times the pursuit itself just creates more stress and anxiety.
Exactly.
And those things that we buy, those possessions, they don't really deliver on the promises that they seem to be making.
Right. It's like we're buying into this idea of what wealth is supposed to look like, but it doesn't necessarily match up with reality.
Yeah. And Housel's insights, I think they really encourage us to look at our own motivations for wanting to accumulate wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, are we seeking financial security and freedom? Or are we chasing, external validation and these status symbols?
I think that's such an important question to ask ourselves. Like, what are we really after?
Yeah, because it's easy to get caught up in that, keeping up with the Joneses type of mentality.
Totally.
And the psychology of money, I think, really pushes us to move beyond, just those purely financial metrics. And instead focus on building a life that, is really in line with our values and what actually brings us happiness.
Yeah, I agree.
So now let's turn our attention to this idea of long-term thinking, which is a really central concept in Housel's approach to building wealth.
Sure.
I think one of the most compelling arguments that Housel makes in The Psychology of Money is this idea of the power of long-term thinking. And he uses this really clever analogy to illustrate it. He talks about ice ages.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He explains that they're not caused by these sudden harsh winters. It's actually this gradual accumulation of ice over thousands of years. And it's because of slightly cooler summers.
Wow.
Yeah. And that subtle change, over time, it eventually leads to a dramatic shift in the Earth's climate.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
It is. And it's a powerful way to visualize how those small, consistent actions that we take with money, compounded over time, can lead to extraordinary results.
Yeah.
So it's not about getting rich quick. It's about playing that long game.
Exactly. It's about those little things that we do day in and day out. And one of the best examples of this is Warren Buffett. I mean, he's like the poster child for long-term investing.
Right.
And Housel points out that most of Buffett's wealth, are you ready for this, was actually accumulated after he turned 50.
That's wild. I mean, most people at that point are thinking about retiring.
Exactly.
So what does that tell us about the role of time in building wealth?
I think it highlights that time is really maybe the most important factor in investing.
Yeah.
The earlier you start, the more time you have to benefit from that exponential growth of compounds.
It's like that snowball effect.
Exactly. And, Housel, he compares Buffett's returns to those of Jim Simons, who's this hedge fund manager known for having, exceptionally high annual returns.
Okay. So are you saying that Simons made more money than Buffett?
Well, not exactly. Simons was generating, really impressive returns year after year. But his overall wealth, it's significantly less than Buffett's.
I'm confused. So how is that possible if his returns were higher?
It all comes down to how long they've each been investing. So Simons might have had higher average annual returns, but Buffett's been in the market for so much longer that he's been able to really reap those benefits of compounding over time.
I see. So it's not just about how much you make each year. It's about how long you can keep that going.
Exactly. And to really understand the power of compounding, Housel uses this simple math example. He says, try calculating 8 plus 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 8 in your head
Okay.
versus 8 by 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 8.
Yeah, that second one's definitely a lot bigger.
Right. And that's the difference between simple addition and exponential growth, like what you get with compounding.
I see. Okay, so time really is the secret ingredient.
It is. But there's another really important element of long-term thinking that Housel emphasizes, and that's survival.
Oh, okay. What does he mean by that?
So to really benefit from that magic of compounding, you need to stay in the game for the long haul. You can't let those ups and downs knock you off course.
Right. It makes sense. Because even if you're earning great returns, one major setback could wipe out all your gains.
Exactly. And that's why Housel talks about two key aspects of what he calls financial survival.
Okay, I'm listening.
The first one is planning for the plan to go wrong. Because life is unpredictable, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even the best laid plans can get totally derailed.
That's the truth.
Oh.
So it's not just about having a plan, but about being able to adapt when things change.
Exactly, and having that backup plan in place. The second part of survival that Housel highlights is this idea of building in a margin of safety.
A margin of safety. I like that. What does that look like in practice?
It could be a few things, like living below your means so that you have that extra cushion, having an emergency fund for unexpected expenses, or even just taking a longer time horizon with your investments.
So it's about creating a buffer to withstand those unexpected setbacks, right?
Precisely. That margin of safety helps make sure that you don't get knocked out of the game prematurely. You can stay invested long enough to actually see those benefits of compounding over time. And Housel, he also goes on to talk about how important it is to be able to accept setbacks and even embrace volatility.
That sounds tough.
It is. But he reminds us that the U.S. economy, it's thrived over time despite all these wars, recessions, natural disasters.
Yeah, we've been through a lot.
Right. And I think having that long-term perspective is crucial because it reminds us that downturns, they're a natural part of the cycle. They don't mean that things are going off track.
So it's about riding those waves, knowing that things will go up and down.
Exactly. And Housel encourages us to cultivate this mindset that balances paranoia and optimism. So be aware of those potential negative events, but also maintain that belief in the long-term potential for growth.
That's a tough balance to strike.
It is. And he also talks about the importance of being comfortable with being wrong, which is a hard one for a lot of people. And he uses the story of Heinz Berggruen, who was an art dealer.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about him.
Well, Berggruen, he amassed this huge and super valuable art collection. But his success, it wasn't because he was right all the time.
So how did he do it?
He understood that by making a lot of acquisitions, even if some of them turned out to be not so valuable, it increased his chances of, having a few huge wins.
So it's like diversifying your art portfolio.
Exactly. And it's a powerful way to think about investing too, right?
Yeah.
Accepting that some of your investments will inevitably fail, it allows you to focus on making enough good decisions over time to reach your goals.
It takes the pressure off of having to be right every single time.
Yeah. And this applies to businesses as well. Housel mentions Jeff Bezos and Reed Hastings.
Oh, yeah, from Amazon and Netflix.
Yep. And both of them, they've said that accepting failure is a key part of how they approach building a successful business.
So it's not about avoiding failure at all costs. It's about understanding that it's part of the process.
Right. And learning from those mistakes so that you can do better next time.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the psychology of money.
Wow. That was a lot of information, but it was fascinating. So what are some of the key things that we should all take away from this book?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that our personal experiences, our biases, they have a huge impact on how we approach money. We also talked about the importance of luck and risk and really defining what enough means for each of us.
Yeah. And then there's the whole idea of long-term thinking, having that margin of safety, being able to accept those setbacks as part of the journey. It's a lot to think about. It is. But the psychology of money gives us a whole new perspective on financial decision-making, right? It encourages us to go beyond just the numbers and look at that complex interplay of psychology, history, even human behavior.
Right. It's about understanding ourselves as much as it is about understanding the markets.
Exactly. And I think this book gives us some really valuable tools to navigate the financial world with more awareness and intention.
I agree. If you want to explore these ideas in more depth, I definitely recommend checking out The Psychology of Money for yourself.
Yeah, it's a great read.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it as insightful as we did.